Brilliant. It's Carl here from Games, Brains and a Head-Banging Life, here with John Yelland, the vocalist and lyricist of heavy metal and power metal band Judicator. John, it's a pleasure to talk with you. How have you been doing?
I've been doing very well. Very excited about the upcoming album. We've been working on it for a long time and a lot of effort has gone into it. So I'm really excited to see the kind of reactions that we get from listeners, and the release here is coming up in a couple of weeks, so not much longer to wait now.
It has been no easy task, I imagine, to try and build towards a new album with what has been going on in the world.
Oh, yeah.
How have you been coping with that?
I'm fortunate in a number of ways because my job, I have a job that allows me to work from home relatively easy. So
Fantastic.
when the quarantine and lockdown started happening, I just shifted my work to the house. And luckily I'm married, so the loneliness is not such a big issue too, because I have a lot of friends who are single and who are in like California, where the lockdown is much more like tough. And the other way, speaking of like geography, in Utah, the coronavirus has been much less of, it hasn't hit us as hard. As opposed to my friends on the East and West Coast, for example, where, like I said, the lockdown is much tougher. And so I know that they've dealt with issues of like isolation and loneliness. So I feel really bad for people who have been hit harder. I feel very fortunate, actually.
No, it's something I can relate to. Obviously, in the UK, lockdown was very light, very, very loose. And it was hard to kind of almost relate to what a lot of other countries were going through, particularly if you continued to do work like I did and stuff like that. But obviously, during all of that, you still got to work towards a release. Obviously, happily, hopefully things are moving in a downward trend in the COVID department, making the release feel less almost pressure-based, I guess.
Yeah, that's been a kind of weird new dynamic because, yeah, I mean, we no longer have any pressure to do performances. I don't think we'll have any performances on the horizon until next year. So that element of pressure is gone. Really, it's just about getting the album and content out, which is kind of relaxing comparatively, but at the same time, you know, we really enjoy playing shows. So that's also disappointing. And I mean, playing shows and doing touring and that kind of thing, it really helps with the promotion of the album too. So I hope that the album is still a great success for us. I think it will be, since we just signed with Prosthetic Records and releasing the album through them. So I'm hoping that the benefits we get from the signing to Prosthetic outweigh the negatives with the COVID situation.
And would you say you've kind of learned a lot in regards to kind of overcoming the challenges of releasing an album while effectively the world is coming out of lockdown but was on lockdown?
That has been, it hasn't affected me so much. I don't normally handle much of the business and the logistics for the band. That's sort of changing. We're moving toward more of a democratic system within the band, where we share more of the responsibility. The bigger we get, the less one person can handle taking that responsibility. So we're spreading it out a little bit more. So I'm getting my my business experience, which is nice because I've normally been a right-hand man kind of guy, and now I have to step into a little bit more leadership role.
That's amazing. You say you kind of, when you want to start a band, you kind of just want to hit the stage, you want to play music, release an album, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah. I mean, that was one thing for me. Like, yeah, it all starts with the passion of the music. You see your favorite bands on stage. You say, I want to do that someday. And I was never a business-minded kind of guy. I'm more of a, I would rather be like a social worker or something rather than like a business owner. And the stark reality is that being in a band, to it actually go anywhere, you have to either have a band manager or you have to develop those skills. You have to be a valid business. It is a business essentially, if you're going to be successful anyways. So
do you gonna see yourselves as a good example, I guess, of how a band can operate, not just with what's going on right now, but in modern times? Because obviously you're all quite spread out throughout the US. So you're obviously taking advantage of technology to write and share ideas and stuff.
Yeah, it's been really interesting because we started to form, because we started out as a side project just between a friend in Utah and Arizona. But it started out as just like a side project, and it got such a good reception that it developed into a full-fledged band. And, you know, all of this was happening too when CD sales started really tanking. And so, like, we formed during a really interesting transition period in the music industry. Yeah.
Do you think then it's something you were kind of forced into that adaptation, or that it's just something because of the band's age, the band's time, that just is there naturally? That change from CD sales to streaming, YouTube, instant gratification.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because the music industry as we know it sort of started in like what, the 1920s or 30s or so. Because prior to then you couldn't like sell music. It wasn't something really that you could sell except for maybe a performance or something. So it was really like an unprecedented development in just like as far as an industry. But I imagine you had similar kind of changes or difficulties in changing from like vinyl to 8-track to CD. But really, like, I think in some ways I worry, I speculate that like physical media will never come back. It'll never be the same. So really, like, as far as I know, it's anyone's guess as to where the actual music industry will go. I have no idea. I don't think it will ever return to the heyday, so to speak. So
no, I can completely understand that. Even with the kind of brief rise we've got of vinyl and even cassette, that's never going to be what it was 40 years ago, because even if you buy something on vinyl, it's only available on streaming probably quicker. You know, you pre-order an album, it can take a week to come after its release, and it's already been out in digital. So you kind of need to be switched on to that, I guess.
And kind of what I like picking up on that, because vinyl has seen a resurgence, but I don't think vinyl will ever be like the default popular medium for listening, for consumption. But the potential that I see with metal is something like what we see with jazz. And what I mean by that is like jazz music, they still have festivals, they still release music, but it's not in the popular like, you know, culture like it was. But it's still a vibrant and healthy subculture, sub-community. And so I think metal has an edge because it's more marketable for sure. And you have these big festivals like Wacken and 70 Tons of Metal. So I wonder, again, I speculate whether metal will eventually become some kind of subculture or subcommunity like what we see with jazz now, but probably bigger. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Because we in metal arguably had our mainstream period in the late 90s with nu metal and the likes of Limp Bizkit and those bands kind of getting that crossover appeal. You still get the odd band now, but certainly not widespread. It feels very underground again.
Yeah, and I just feel so fortunate. Like in the U.S., I feel so bad. Like a band like not a huge band like Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, but a modestly big band like Blind Guardian or Gamma Ray or Halloween. Gamma Ray or Halloween, if they come to the U.S., where in Europe they would play to thousands and thousands of people, when they come to U.S., they may play for 1,000 or 2,000 or even hundreds of people. But I'm really grateful because I know that Japan and Europe and South America, like there are still big holdouts where you have the ability to put thousands of people in a venue. So that's kind of what gives me more hope that metal can continue to be something bigger compared to like jazz, because there is still more of a crossover and appeal, and it feels like it can stay more modern and relevant and continue to grow in a way that jazz maybe can't.
Absolutely. And back to you guys then, I guess. You're somewhat, would you call yourselves a prolific band? Because Let There Be Nothing is the 5th studio release in, roughly 8 years?
Yeah.
Does creativity then just come really easy for Judicator?
I don't know. What I can say is that I know Tony and I, being the primary songwriters, we really, really care. Tony is just constantly writing. That's part of what has allowed us to have such a consistent stream of albums come out. Because like even right now, we basically have the next album written. And so whenever we're working on an album, he's already got the next album basically already written. So that allows us to kind of just keep cranking them out. And then as far as like, I don't know that I would call us prolific. I just would say that we care. A lot of research and study goes into the preparation for the lyrics side of any album. Like for this last album, Let There Be Nothing, I read maybe 3 or 4 books on Eastern Roman Byzantine history. Because my goal is basically that I want somebody who has no idea what this is about to come in and like the lyrics, like the music. And if they choose to read the lyrics, they'll say, wow, this is really good. But also, if a historian were to read the lyrics and be like, yeah, we'll see. He probably just went to Wikipedia and thought this was a cool subject. I want a historian to be able to read the lyrics and be like, damn, actually, yeah, this is pretty good.
Oh, that's amazing. And of course, you've already mentioned it. Obviously, Let There Be Nothing is conceptual release. Correct me if I'm saying this correctly. Belisarius?
Belisarius.
There we go.
Probably acceptable pronunciation.
Where did this idea come from? The focus on this particular general and his exploits?
I had always had a fascination with Emperor Justinian. And because it had piqued my interest that we generally think of Rome as having existed from, 47 BC to sometime in the 400s? But that's just not the case. Rome actually continued until the year 1453 in the East. Western Rome fell, but Eastern Rome continued on. And I just found that interesting since the beginning that there's this sort of misconception. It's like Rome, Byzantium. And it's like, no, that's not the case. So that's interesting. But Justinian especially is the last emperor who really honestly tried to recapture all of those lands that were lost when Western Rome fell. And he did. He managed to, by the time he died, he managed to secure a lot of the territory that Rome in the West had formerly had. One of his main generals for those exploits was Belisarius. as far as what turned me on to Belisarius, because I originally wanted to make this about Justinian, but I came across a YouTube video, a YouTube series about Justinian, and it's called Extra History. So if you want some fun, interesting videos on history, go to Extra History, and they have a series on Justinian. But in watching this little series, I found myself much more appealed or attracted to Belisarius. And so that led me down the rabbit hole where I got all of these books on Belisarius, and I found, man, what a tragic character, what a tragic guy, because out of all the characters, we've covered Napoleon and Frederick the Great and Godfrey de Bouillon from the First Crusade. We've covered all of these grand figures, but Belisarius was a really good general. He was a really good general. I would even say great, but he's the most normal, everyday kind of guy out of everybody we've covered. So I am really, really happy with the album, the lyrics especially. Because with the lyrics too, sorry, I'm ranting here, but I guess that's what this is all about. The album has 8 songs, and so in addition to really caring about the lyrics and Belisarius, I mean, this is a guy who, his wife had a ongoing affair with their godson. And for Christians at the time, when you were related to somebody by like a godson or godparent, that was considered essentially on the same level as a real blood mother and blood father. So on top of it being offensive that she would cheat on him with another man, there's kind of an incestuous level there. Not literally, but that the level
on that belief,
yeah, like that's how important it was. So I found that interesting. But here's a guy who also, he could have killed Antonina. He could have killed her, and he might have been punished by the emperor, but nobody would have blamed him. In fact, that he decided to not kill her, everybody regarded him as a puppet, as a cuck, as all of the bad things you could throw out at him. But I just found it really interesting, this sort of morality play in Belisarius' life. And things ended up taking care of themselves, because when Belisarius actually did give in and try to act against Antonina, the Empress Theodora freed Antonina, freed the godson Theodosius. So when Belisarius tried to do something about it, it ended up falling apart in his hands. And after that, not long thereafter, the godson died of sepsis, which is a very painful death. So things, I guess, end up working out. But back to the song thing, or the album thing, the arrangement. So the album is comprised of 8 songs, and I'm really into film analysis and story analysis. So I thought, I'm going to try to make the album fit in a traditional 8-act story structure. So not only is it a really neat lyrical concept and all of that, but it has like an introduction setting the scene, it has an inciting incident, it has a rising action, it has a climax, a resolution. It hits all of those beats that you would see in a well-made, well-scripted movie.
Amazing, because obviously conveying the scale and scope of a story and experience like what you've just described, aside from lyrical content, it's very, very difficult, particularly as you want as many different people to hear what you're playing. How on earth did you balance that?
Sorry, could you rephrase the question? Like,
when it came to expressing the scope and scale, aside from the lyrical content, How do you balance getting across what is ultimately what you want, a good power metal album that will appeal to widespread audiences, and conveying that incredible story?
That is something that kind of hurts because I feel like, well, it's just a reality. Most people want the catchy hooks, and they want the nice things that they can sing along to. Most people are not going to get out the lyric booklet or go online and like really like follow the story and be like, wow, this is a good story. So I mean, I craft my lyrics and melodies in one sense for the front end consumers, the people who are just like casual listeners. Because of course, like Blind Guardian, it's like catchy vocals, catchy lines. So yeah, I want it to be accessible, but in one sense, I'm writing for the 10 or 20 people who actually get into it, you know?
That's totally fair. Ultimately, the idea is to push that idea as well, be it in social media posts and stuff like all what you've described. You can learn very easily just by spending 10 minutes on your Facebook page and so on. So it's there if you really, really want. I guess the hope would be someone who's never heard of you listens and hears one song, one of the singles, and thinks, oh, I really like that. Let me check out the rest of the album. And then they go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, and get hooked in. That's the idea. And you know, the other thing too is it's like, you know, it's not easy for the everyday person to identify with a 6th century Eastern Roman Byzantine man. But so it's like not history isn't everybody's cup of tea, sure, but again, I think communicating it in a way that's relatable and timeless. Because really, it's like, this is a story. Part of what I like about what I try to do is the story you're telling needs to be adaptable for a Western or a sci-fi, like whatever, you know?
It's fascinating in that I'm getting a history lesson today, not just from you, but my earlier interview was all about Joan of Arc and an album based completely around that. So I've heard loads of information about this stuff today. It's great.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out then too.
Yeah, Abduction, French black metal band. Okay, good. So obviously all of Judicator's albums to date, you've already mentioned, all been conceptual in some way or another. Now, I wanted to ask you, how does that work for you guys? Is it a matter of you read something or see something and think that's interesting? Or do you already almost, I guess, have a pre-prepared list that you kind of want to, let's look at that in the future?
That is an interesting question because I am very interested in history in general. So there are always ideas that I have floating around. But the thing of it is the music needs to match the feeling of the content. Like I feel Let There Be Nothing, this album's music, I could not have put with an album about the American West, for example. I don't feel that would have really fit, even though the American West is something that it's on my bucket list. Like it would be neat.
Infinitely fascinating. Yeah.
But so the music kind of tells me to begin with what kind of topic needs to be told. So really what it comes down to is whatever I'm reading at the time, whatever I've put in my back pocket, so to speak, for the future. So generally, like right now, we have this big block of music, and it happens to be really moody. And for the next album, it happens to be very moody and kind of open and progressive almost. So that's got me convinced. Oh, I was convinced before because I already have the next album's outline already complete. But it's going to be something of a sequel to At the Expense of Humanity. And you're like, how the hell do you do that? It's like, trust Papa John. I've got it. But just the music will tell you what you need to write. And I've had it before where I wanted to use this subject and I try playing with lyrics and I sing back like what I've got and I'm like, it would work, but it's not right.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. It's a perfect way to match it up. It's
Yeah.
I love that ultimately whatever you're reading will inspire you in some way. It's just whether or not it fits the overall Judicator theme.
Yeah.
The response to the 3 singles so far, so we've had Gloria, Tomorrow's Sun, and the title track. It's been pretty good. I was looking earlier on the YouTube comments, of all places to check out YouTube comments, but it is predominantly positive.
Yeah.
That's got to relax you a little bit in advance of this release.
Yeah, I was a little bit nervous just because we were going a totally new direction as far as production is concerned. Because we did our mixing and mastering with, I think his name is Damian Herring or something like that, but he does the engineering for Horrendous, really good death metal band. But so we were going for more of like a organic traditional metal kind of sound. So I was like, I don't know what people are going to expect, because the past 2 albums have been very crisp, well manicured and produced sonically. But yeah, my nervousness has been pretty much put to rest. You know, you're always going to have people who it doesn't jive with, but like you said, predominantly it's been a positive response. So I feel a little bit vindicated.
Fantastic, because obviously the singles as well, I think the singles that you have released show off the variety in the albums. You can have your grandiose, larger tracks alongside ones that you described as a bit more traditional, heavy metal.
Yeah.
So I think the balance has already been shown to the audience. This is what we sound like on this album, so if it's positive, well, it only suggests great things for the overall album, I think.
Yeah. Oh man, and that was the other thing too, because we signed with Prosthetic and they wanted 3 singles, and I'm like, 3 singles on an 8 album. I mean, that's almost half of the album that we're giving everybody in advance. So I wasn't sure how I felt about that. But what I was hoping would not happen is, like, you don't want to give all of the best away up front. And I'm very happy to say that as much as I really adore Gloria, and as much as I love Let There Be Nothing, and Tomorrow's Sun is a whole different kind of animal, but really, like, I'm being so honest, like, the best is yet to be released. The tracks like Strange to the World, that's like probably in my top 3 favorite Judicator songs that there is. And The Way of a Pilgrim, there's there's harmonies in The Way of a Pilgrim that remind me of Ghost. So spooky, and I love it.
I'm glad you already said that the best is yet to come, because I actually agree with you. From my own review, there's other tracks, and the ones you mentioned, including as well Let There Be Light. I think that definitely deserves a massive shout out, but making you feel 10 feet tall, man, listening to that track. Yeah, there's a lot more for people to enjoy. I think it's going to go down a storm, man. I really do.
I hope so. I'm always a little bit humbled too, because with our first album, King of Rome, of course about Napoleon's return from exile, and I wanted to include some French in there. And so I had like a song called Tu n'es pas mort coquin, but I pronounce it in the recording coquine, I think. And it's like, why didn't I do just the basic? I took French in high school, so I was all like, no, I got it. Nope, I don't. Mispronounced it. So we eventually did a re-recording of Tu n'es pas mort coquin, and I fixed it there. But the reason I bring this up is because in Let There Be Light, I made a very silly mistake. It's Ha Stavrosnika, not O Stavrosnika. So I mispronounced that too. So I hope the Greeks don't get their panties in a bunch over that.
Call it an Easter egg.
An Easter egg. There you go.
Because you like Easter eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple in, obviously, the title track. Now, I know one of them. Apparently there's 3, right? And I know 1, Blind Guardian's A Dark Passage.
Probably. I think we actually have another Somewhere Far Beyond reference in Sleepy Plesso.
Okay.
Let me pull up the lyrics here. What were the Easter eggs you had in Let There Be Light?
Lyrics from A Dark Passage.
Oh, yeah, in Let There Be Nothing, the ever marching on, still we're marching on. That was very, the story behind that was like, Tony, so again, I get the music, and then I do with it whatever I please, I suppose. And the outro for Let There Be Nothing just had that feeling. And I'm like, would it be bad if I just made a nod to A Dark Passage here? And I'm like, it's not like super obvious, but it's obvious enough that anybody who's heard that song would be like, ah.
If you're a Blind Guardian fan, I think you'll see it. It's ultimately one of your influences, and it's a nod to it and a tribute to a degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it fit, and I'm like, what the hell? Why not? What's the worst that could happen?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you ever see yourselves as changing expectations of other power metal fans in general? In particular, you're not a band that I feel, particularly on this new album, that are constrained by power metal and that tag and what that means. As you already said yourself, there are elements of traditional heavy metal, but changing the perception of fans is a tough one. Is that something you guys see yourselves able to do?
Yes. And I just say that because we have tried to be as transparent about, we've tried to be as transparent to our fans and supporters as possible, that we don't want to be boxed in. King of Rome and The Last Emperor are like straightforward power metal, but we've got At the Expense of Humanity that is like this weird progressive blend with power metal and prog. And Let There Be Nothing, of course, has more traditional elements, and even like these weird fusions with like almost Opeth, you know, in like Strange to the World. I believe that main like do 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 riff that Tony had was inspired by Opeth, and I know there's if memory serves me right, a lot of Cynic influences in At the Expense of Humanity, and you know Tony has been working on Doom material. Like we just don't want, like if we want to do a Doom album, then we want to be able to do it without people freaking out or something. So we really like to be able to explore everything lyrically, but also musically.
Fantastic. It really does feel like Judicator is on an upward swing at the moment. Like you've been growing and growing and growing. Now obviously you've signed to Prosthetic Records, the new album, and it feels like you potentially could smash through that glass ceiling, the one that exists above any metal band.
Yeah.
Is that something you guys are feeling?
I think so. There's going to be some very interesting changes going forward in the next year or so that I think are going to be weird, but also really positive for the band. And yeah, I'm just really intrigued to see once the COVID situation dies down, if we can have maybe bigger and longer tours, or if we just still play it safe and do festivals. I'm really curious to see what we can do.
Ultimately, we come down to that then. The last thing I have for you, obviously 2020 is mostly a bit of a washout, and you can only plan so far. Is that kind of the provisional potential idea that 2021, provided you're able to, is just going to be hammering the live scene?
We have to deliver an album to Prosthetic by the end of 2021. So among the priorities that I can say for sure is that we want to launch a Patreon in early 2021, and we have some fantastic ideas about that. We just need to talk with Prosthetic to make sure that everything's kosher on that end.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Would that Patreon be to fund the new album potentially, or just for the band overall?
I think for the band overall, because
Cool.
we do get some money from Prosthetic to record and do whatever we need with that. But I have really, really exciting, good ideas for what Judicator can do, especially if we have a decent Patreon, following.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
It's taking advantage of what's there, and hardcore fan base will want whatever you can offer, be it, I don't know, mugs or whatever, or just behind the scenes videos and live streams and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, the one idea that I'm really high on is, if you contribute X amount of money per month, and you'll gain access to a personal concert, and we'll live stream it, or you can come. But that's cool enough already. But I love the idea of having fans vote for what set list we play. That would be cool. And I just think, like, can you imagine like Blind Guardian or Iron Maiden or Judas Priest doing that kind of thing? Like, that would be so cool. So
Yeah.
those are the kind of ideas where I'm like, I would love to do it. So that means it's got to be at least a good idea.
Brilliant. I think that's a fantastic idea. It seems no matter what, pay attention to Judicator over the next year and a half. You're going to be busy.
Let's hope so, yeah. Get
John,
the world to calm down a little.
yes, that as well. The most important thing, that you are actually able to be busy.
Yeah.
John, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate this interview.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time, and this was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/GBHBL, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?